Let me ask you about, because I'm thinking about your lonely but relentless quest to get the minimum wage raised. You have never hesitated to fight big fights inside your own party. And when the Republicans first took the majority in 1995, you waged a very famous and well-documented fight against Tom DeLay, who was determined, and much of an issue of the heart for him, to reduce the regulatory power of the Environmental Protection Agency. And this was at the height of the euphoria of the majority coming in. He was one of the strongest ideological voices in the party. Tell us how that happened exactly. What happened there between the two of you and your ultimate success?
Well, it was never a personal thing between a DeLay and a Boehlert. As a matter of fact, I've enjoyed a very good relationship with Tom DeLay because one of his strengths is he's smart enough to recognize that if we want to maintain the majority, we can't all look just like Tom DeLay, and we can't all be from Texas. And if we want to be a national party, we've got to have some New York guys. We've got to have some people from Washington State and like that. So I've got a good relationship. But I think some people in the leadership misread what 94 really meant. In 94, after 40 years in the wilderness, Newt Gingrich, in contract with America largely, led us to the promised land. We then became the majority. And parenthetically, let me point out the Democrats said, well, that's an anomaly, it will never happen again. Well, it's 2006, we're still in the majority. But there's an old saying in politics, is you dance with who brung you. And there was a feeling in the Republican leadership that the business community has always been, by and large, very supportive of Republicans, have been generous in supporting Republicans financially, and a genuine interest in helping the business community, because the theory is that as business goes, you remember Engine Charlie Wilson from General Motors, as General Motors goes, so goes America. Well, the philosophy among the Republicans is if we do well by business, and not just in rewarding them, but if we make it possible for business to prosper, the country prospers, more people are employed, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the things that some wizard came up with is an idea for devolution. They're going to take the Environmental Protection Agency, and instead of having a central agency in Washington in charge of environmental policy and regulation, devolve to the states and give it to the individual states. We're great states writers. Oh, they didn't factor in something. The business community said, we don't want that. The last thing we want is to deal with 50 individual sets of state regulations. We want to deal with one agency at the federal level. Now, we want to influence, in a pro-business way, the decisions of that agency, but please don't go ahead with this devolution policy. Keep EPA. And so we're going up to the first recess we have, the first major recess we're going to have in the new majority in August. And there were appropriations bills on the floor, and the Washington Post captured it in an editorial headlined "The 17 Riders from Hell." And there were individual provisions of those appropriations bill that would weaken environmental policy in a whole bunch of different areas, 17 altogether. And they thought it was going to slide right through, and it didn't, because there were some of us who said, no, that's not the way to go. And I was a leader, maybe by default, because nobody else wanted to step forward, but I led the effort, and we succeeded in getting those 17 riders from hell out of those appropriations bills. I would suggest that the environment was better served by getting rid of those. I would suggest that the business community and all Americans were better served by getting rid of that. And I think the Republican Party was better served, because we're lurching to the right and we're saying, wait a minute, come back a little more to the middle where the majority of the Americans are. And on environmental issues, my experience is the American people are usually ahead of the Congress.
But your environmentalism made you quite unpopular with some of your colleagues in your party from the West, who really saw this as a matter of their constituents' ability to make a living either by developing or by drilling for oil or by logging. And you butted heads with some members of your own party who were personally critical of you. Somebody, I'm trying to think who it was, who said, well, what does he know? He's from a place where there's just concrete.
Well,
Not understanding where upstate New York is
it
exactly.
personally cost me a great loss short-term, temporary, because I'll never forget, we had an air base in my district, Griffiths Air Force Base, that in 1993 was designated by the Base Realignment Closing Commission for elimination. Big loss to the area. But the commission said you ought to keep just one separate function, Air Force Research Laboratory, in what they call a cantonment area. So it would be a standalone research facility, no longer on a military base because everything else went away. And so in '95, the next BRAC commission said, let's eliminate that laboratory. So with that, everything would have gone. And we fought it and successfully fought it. And so we won. So the laboratory was retained. And the commission concluded it would be far too costly to move it, a couple $100 million, to different places. And it would be totally disruptive of critically important ongoing research. So don't move it. So after we got through congratulating each other, I said to myself, there will be another BRAC commission. Where is our potential area of vulnerability? And when I examined it carefully, I discovered that we had older facilities, just post-World War II facilities, in various states of disrepair, didn't have a modern, up-to-date laboratory. So I went to work to get a laboratory facility. And I got the Department of Defense and the Air Force to put in a budget request, some money for this, and then I was able to get the Armed Services Committee, I thought, to approve $12.5 million, and I was able to convince the state that they should match it, so we'd get $25 million for this new laboratory. And the subcommittee on military construction of the Armed Services Committee met and reported out a bill. And every one of the Air Force requests was in that bill except mine. So I went to the chairman of the subcommittee, Joel Heffley of Colorado, who is now a good friend, but I went to him on the floor. He's one of the Westerners you're talking about. I said, Joel, what happened? You reported the bill out. Was this a clerical mistake? He said, no. I said, well, what happened? He said, I don't like your voting record. You're involved in issues that are none of your business. Those are our issues. What do you mean they're your issues? National parks, they're just Western parks? You mean we don't own them in the East? And so it took the Speaker of the House. We had 3 separate meetings with Congressman Heffley, and the Speaker said, look, the Air Force wants it, it's cost effective, it makes sense. Boehlert's a good guy, a senior guy, he's carrying it. Joel, I wish you'd back off. He refused to do it. Well, he didn't budge, but to the credit of the Speaker, we did an end run, and we got it in an appropriations bill without the authorization. And that lab is there today, a new $25 million state-of-the-art facility. And fast forward to 2005, another BRAC commission came along, and they were going to do damage to the Air Force lab at Rome. But when they reviewed everything and we pointed out they've got these magnificent facilities and critically important work, they decided against it, and Rome Lab is still there operating in a new facility.
But what was that like for you to be actually personally disliked because of an issue about which you felt very strongly and about which you have great principles by colleagues within your own party? Did you feel ostracized? I mean, was that an unpleasant time in your congressional career?
You feel a temporary ostracizing underway. Like when I was dealing with the 17 riders from hell. I mean, they didn't like, the leadership didn't like going home for a first major recess after having suffered a defeat on the floor. But look, politics is of the moment. You took a snapshot at the time, you say Boehlert's ostracized because of this, but the next day, politicians know that you're different allies, different days, different fights, different days. It goes on, and to this day, Joel Heffley is retiring right now. I consider him a very good friend. And Joe Barton of Texas, we disagree on a number of things. He's chairman of Energy and Commerce Committee. But we have a good working relationship, and he has every reason to, quite frankly, hate my guts, because I led the fight about 10 years ago to put an end to that vast superconducting super collider project that was going to cost, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars, and it was in his district. And so, you know, when that went under, and that cost that district over 3,000 jobs and a lot of potential for other growth, he had every reason to say, that SOB, I'm never going to talk to him again. But he did. He is above that, just like Heffley is above that. For the moment, there were daggers between us. But the moment passed, and we went on, and we're allies in other ventures.